Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the stories that we have topping our headlines tonight. A sentencing hearing for Freedom Convoy leaders Tamara Lich and Chris Barber begins today. Also, the man accused of ramming an SUV into a crowd, killing 11 people at a street festival, will appear in court to see if he's fit to stand trial. And 3 miners trapped underground at a BC mine following an overnight accident.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks for joining us. It's the third and final day of the Premier's meeting in Ontario's cottage country. The Premiers and Prime Minister Mark Carney presented a united front yesterday in the face of U.S. tariffs, but revealed little about the negotiations with an August 1st deadline and trade talks fast approaching. On today's agenda, Premiers are addressing internal trade, healthcare, and public safety. Speaking to reporters, Ontario Premier Doug Ford said he wants to see changes to the current legislation of bail reform.
Well, we have to toughen up bail reform, and we can't release people the next day after they kick people's doors in, put guns to people's head, terrorize the neighborhood, terrorize families, and they get in the back of the police vehicle and they start mocking our police, and then they go to some weak-kneed judge that lets them out. It's absolutely terrible, and we need mandatory sentences. You steal cars, you break into people's homes, there has to be a penalty, or they just keep repeating the offense, and people are done. It's not just they're out on bail once, they'll be out 4 or 5 times.
BC Premier David Eby made a surprise announcement at the end of today's meeting. He told reporters that 3 miners have been trapped underground at British Columbia's Red Chris copper and gold mine following an overnight accident.
They are, to the best of our knowledge, uninjured and in a refuge area. There was early communication with the company. The company is working with our world-leading mining rescue teams. BC miners are the best in the world. Our rescue teams are exceptional, and they will be working overtime to bring these workers home safely to their families.
Eby says 2 of the workers are from BC and another is from Ontario. The mine is about 230 kilometers south of the Yukon border. A sentencing hearing for Freedom Convoy leaders Tamara Lich and Chris Barber has begun in an Ottawa courtroom. 2 days have been set aside for the hearing. Back in April, both were convicted of mischief in connection to the 2022 protests of COVID-19 public health measures that saw the downtown core of the nation's capital paralyzed for 3 weeks. The Crown is seeking a 7-year prison sentence for Lich and 8 years for Barber, who was also convicted of disobeying a court order by encouraging demonstrators to keep honking their truck horns. A man accused of ramming an SUV into a crowd and killing 11 people at a Filipino street festival in Vancouver in April is set to appear in court today. A judge is holding a 2-day fitness hearing to determine if 30-year-old Adam Kaiji Low is fit to stand trial. Low is now facing 11 charges of second-degree murder after police announced yesterday that 3 additional charges had been approved. Vancouver police say months after the attack, 6 people are still in the hospital in stable condition. All eyes will be on a London, Ontario courtroom on Thursday as a judge is set to rule on whether the actions of 5 former junior hockey players inside a London hotel room in 2018 constituted sexual assault. The trial wrapped up about a month ago and has put sports culture under a national microscope and sparked a new wave of conversations about consent.
The trial itself had a lot of upheaval. There were a lot of challenges and setbacks. There was a mistrial almost right off the bat. And then several weeks later, the jury was dismissed again, and the whole thing switched to a judge alone just to avoid having to start over a second time. The legal experts I've spoken to say that, regardless of the outcome on Thursday, that this case has really sparked a lot of conversations about consent, and specifically, Canada's consent laws and the standard for consent, which is really high, and that it has the potential just to have an impact beyond kind of the legal sphere, to the broader society. So some of that is those conversations that people are having amongst themselves and with their children about consent and those kinds of things. From a legal perspective, there's also some potentially interesting things, according to the experts. One of them could be what the judge says in terms of what are reasonable steps to take to determine whether someone is consenting, which was one of the big issues in the trial. And the other is that one of the charges that McLeod faces, which is being a party to the offense of sexual assault, is actually really unusual. During their submissions, the Crown said that being a party to an offense is usually used more in murder cases than sexual assault. And so it will be really interesting to see what the judge has to say about that.
Today in Boise, Idaho, a judge sentenced Brian Kohberger to life in prison without parole for the murders of 4 students at the University of Idaho in 2022. As part of a surprise plea deal before the start of his trial earlier this month, Kohberger admitted to killing the 4 students after entering their off-campus home. In court today, families of the victims addressed the killer.
He is a hollow vessel, something less than human. A body without empathy, without remorse. He chose destruction. He chose evil. He feels nothing. He tried to take everything from me. My friends, my safety, my identity, my future. He took their lives, but I will continue trying to be like them, to make them proud.
As for his sentence, we support the plea agreement. Society needs to be protected against this evil. As for the defendant, we will not waste words, nor will we fall into hatred and bitterness. Evil has many faces, and we now know this, but evil does not deserve our time and attention.
The judge gave Kohberger 4 consecutive life sentences for the murders, plus 10 years for felony burglary. Well, Parks Canada has canceled the permit for a rising mega Christian musicians concert at a historic site in Halifax. The, quote, controversial concert by American Christian rocker and missionary Sean Foyt was scheduled to happen tonight at the York Redoubt National Historic Site. Parks Canada says it revoked the permit for safety and security considerations based on confirmation of planned protests and on advice from police. Foyt responded on his YouTube channel.
We are hitting on something in the nation of Canada, and this is not the hour to back down. This is not the hour to cower. This is not the hour to bow down to the mob. No, we need to rise up.
The concert was moved to the town of Shubenacadie. Foyt's Canadian tour will cross the country through the month of August. Well, the city of Lethbridge says Henderson Lake is seeing little algae bloom and cyanobacteria levels this summer, thanks in part to weather. 2 employees from Lethbridge Polytechnic, Tyler Branson and Jin Kim, monitor the lake's water every 2 weeks by collecting samples to measure oxygen levels, take nutritional analysis, and monitor algae concentration. Phosphorus can fuel algae growth, especially in hot weather. It was what caused a cyanobacteria advisory last summer, but cooler temperatures and heavy rainfall have caused levels to remain low this year. The city says the work of the 2 men helps keep tabs on the state of the lake in order to ensure safety for all people and pets surrounding it.
The main concern with cyanobacteria is the toxins that the bacteria can produce. When we're just looking at a lake that we presume has an algae bloom or cyanobacteria bloom, we don't know for sure whether it's toxic or not, so we tend to err on the side of caution. The toxins that are released are harmful to humans, animals, livestock, etc. So it's best to not have any contact. It can cause some skin irritations, but the majority of the concerns come if you ingest it or inhale it.
When we're out here on Tuesdays, we're mostly collecting our samples, and then we do the majority of our work back at the lab at the Polytechnic. So it is a 2-phase process for us. It provides us a lot of hands-on experience, especially for some of the summer students we do bring out. It's not very often you get to do your Ekman grabs and are out on a lake for a morning taking these samples. So it's really beneficial for us to be able to provide these opportunities to students that we have.
I'm a greenhouse technician, slash research assistant. So I'm pretty much stuck in the in the greenhouse all day working with plants, and every 2 weeks I get to come out here, and especially when it's sunny like this, it's really nice.
Regular copper algaecide treatments from the city additionally helps maintain algae levels to a minimum. Detailed reports of the lake's health will also be compiled at the end of the season. The Bayou Ranch south of Calgary wants to get the word out about a historic painting they are trying to recover that was accidentally sold earlier this month. The painting comes from a local Calgary artist who regularly displays her paintings at the Bayou's general store. The painting in question depicts the Bayou site before the ranch was established with herds of bison. While the painting was initially meant to be on consignment for sale, the artist opted to sell the painting to Bayou after deciding it was meant for the store to keep. However, a staff member in the gift shop who was unaware of the fact sold the painting to a customer. Now the volunteer organization Friends of the Bayou Ranch are trying to track down the customer to get the painting back.
A gentleman walked in and said, "Oh, is that for sale?" And the brand new staff member went, "Well, I don't know." So they took it down. There was no sold sticker on it. And being a really proactive staff member, she went into the system to see if she could find it. And she went, "Oh, yeah, it's in here. This is what the price is." And the gentleman went, "Oh, I'll take it." And unfortunately, that was the cost of the materials in this painting. And it should have been transferred from our inventory into our assets at a larger value. And that step didn't happen, and it was the perfect storm.
Friends of the Bayou Ranch say they don't blame him for buying the artwork, but they will offer a total refund if it's returned. Seasons Retirement Communities held the 2025 Remarkable Residence Program at 4 of its senior living communities in Canada, an event celebrating those who make these spaces truly special. Well, this year's event featured heartwarming stories of resilience, wisdom, and legacy. Residents from Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia participated. However, the main recognition went to a senior from Lethbridge whose life story deeply touched hearts.
I moved in here after my wife had passed away.
It's a story marked by love and loss, which continues to inspire all who hear it.
I went on a mission for my church, and when I returned, I met my wife Marjorie. I took her home and I proposed to her in February and married her in March. We had been married 68 years when she had passed away, and I was fortunate that I retired when I was 55. Marge and I spent all our time together doing things, going places, and developing a very special relationship. She supported me in everything I did, and she brought love into our home. When she passed away, I not only lost my wife, but I lost my best friend.
Today, at nearly 94 years old, Harris stands as a living testimony to resilience, continuing to leave a meaningful mark on his community. Alongside the memory of his great love, his passion for serving others remains unwavering.
What you plant in your mind in the morning, you will harvest in the afternoon, be it good or evil, so plant well. And I think that a positive thought in the morning or a good thought in the morning starts your day out right. I just feel that we all have a responsibility to try and help each other out. So that's one way that I thought. I was taught that when I was a child, to love and appreciate other people and to find some ways and means of being able to help them. I've been told that if you want to be happy, you want to help other people to be happy, and you will be happy too.
Harris turned his recognition into a gift of hope. His wish was that Seasons Lethbridge Gardens donate $10,000 to Operation Smile Canada.
I have 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and 24 great-grandchildren. I guess I was surprised that I won the contest. My kids, they were going to make sure I won. They contacted all their friends.
Boyd came to us about a little over a year ago. and his thoughtful moments. He'd give us a thought of the day. He was always checking in on us, and that's kind of what made us nominate Boyd for his experiences. We got to know him on a different base. For our home, it's just fantastic to have Boyd be the winner.
Success to me is the ability to look back over my life and to be able to smile. I can look back over my life and I can smile. Well, I would hope that people, that they in turn would feel that they have a responsibility to help out somebody else, to reach out to them.
His story shows that the will to help never fades. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echavarria.
Well, it's no secret that Alberta gets its fair share of hail, and now it's driving researchers to the area. Western University in Ontario researchers have arrived in the province to do just that. The Northern Hail Project is working to better understand and predict the devastating forces of nature around Hailstorm Alley, which runs from High River, which is just south of Calgary, to central Alberta. It's the site of more than 40 hailstorms every summer, causing hundreds of millions of dollars in damage.
We've been out here every summer since 2022 doing field work, which is instrumental for our research because we adopted a ground-up approach of collecting data on the ground. And Hail Alley, as the name suggests, is where we have a lot of hail in the summer months. So it was an obvious choice to come here to collect hailstones. Our long-term goal is to better understand the meteorology, the climatology, and the impacts of hailstones. So one of our big foci is to increase resilience of municipalities and cities to deal with hail. I mean, Calgary is a great example. You know, we have 1.3 million people here. There's a lot of assets that are in harm's way. So we have to build communities that, of course, we can't move our house, we can't move our vehicle necessarily, but we can do things that will help us put things out of harm's way. This is the new record Canadian hailstone. So this fell in 2022 near Innisfail, in a place called Markerville. And as you can see, this stone was probably a lot bigger than it is now, because you can see this chunks broke up. This actually fell through some trees. And we think that some of the stone got broken off.
Builds up through accretion of water and ice and that sort of thing, and it gets bigger and bigger, and then eventually gravity takes over and it falls. And it falls pretty fast by the time it reaches the ground. It can be over 100 and 120 kilometers an hour for a quarter-sized stone even.
Wow. The Northern Hail Project falls under the umbrella of the Canadian Severe Storms Laboratory, which is working to enhance our understanding of severe convective storms and their impacts and how to better prepare for them. Well, as far as we can tell, there's no hail on the horizon here, although in Lethbridge we did see some over the weekend. I will be right back with a look at our local and national weather forecast. So nice to have it feel more like summertime today. Last check, we exceeded that daytime high of 23 and got up to 25 degrees. And that mercury is just going to keep on rising throughout the week. 28 for the high on Thursday, 26 on Friday, back to 24 on Saturday. A lovely weekend ahead of us there. 26 on Sunday. Same thing for Monday. Monday could see a slight chance of showers, though, 30%. And then 27 to round out that 7-day forecast on Tuesday. So average high for this time of year, 26 degrees. Average low, 11. 37 was our record high on this day back in 2003, and in 1946 we saw our record cold, which was only 4 degrees. 5:50 is when the sun rose this morning. Sunset tonight at 9:25 p.m. So we're 4 minutes less daylight than we were yesterday. So that gives us daytime. 15 hours, 35 minutes of daylight. So we're getting shorter there. On the west coast tomorrow, mainly sunny skies. High 23 in Victoria, 18 by the water where the onshore winds blow. 23 in Vancouver, more like 27 inland. Edmonton, could see risk of thunderstorms and late afternoon showers. 26 for the high, 27 in Calgary with mainly sunny skies. Looking to the rest of the prairies, we're seeing a lot of sunshine across the rest of these prairies here. 25 for the high in Saskatoon, 26 Regina, and also 25 in Winnipeg with sunshine but hazy skies. Now, we are seeing a heat warning in effect for the central part of the country here. Look at these temperatures and you will see why. So 34 Toronto and Ottawa. Ottawa could see risk of thunderstorms tomorrow. 33 in Montreal tomorrow with clear skies. As we get on over to the Maritimes, The East Coast, so Fredericton coming in at a high of 29 degrees, 26 in Halifax tomorrow, 25 for the high in Charlottetown, and a lovely 24 degrees in St. John's. So it should be a lovely day across the country. There you have it. That is your forecast. Voting by some 55,000 Canada Post workers is still underway. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers has urged union members to vote no on the Crown Corporation's final offer. Amid fears of strike action, some experts say that a no vote will result in a lockout or layoffs, and businesses are ready to abandon the service altogether. BCN's Naveen Day has more.
The Canadian Union of Postal Workers, or CUPW, which represents 55,000 Canada Post employees, is being forced to vote on a new deal despite not reaching an agreement in 18 months of negotiations. During this period, many businesses have already given up on the Crown Corporation following a number of work stoppages. Recent data released by the Canadian Federation for Independent Business shows a mass exodus from the service at an alarming rate is happening at the small business level.
Small businesses they've been impacted by a lot of uncertainty, and they're concerned that any more Canada Post disruptions will impact their ability to reach their customers and to do business. When we looked at the results of the 2024 strike, we saw that roughly 13% of Canadian small business owners walked away entirely from Canada Post, and there's roughly 3/4 that rely on the private courier market currently to meet their needs. When we look at what small businesses are using Canada Post for, it's mainly for sending checks. Not very many of them are using them as a package courier service. In fact, roughly 1/5 of small businesses see Canada Post as critical to their business. So that's not a lot of businesses that are really relying on Canada Post these days.
Approximately 73% of small businesses rely on private couriers for package delivery, and Canada Post is mainly utilized for letter carriage. To prevent private companies such as Amazon from expanding their extensive delivery network into letter carriage, the CFIB says Canada Post needs to pay attention to recommendations already given to them.
Well, we've seen the federal government and Canada Post undertake a lot of reviews over the past decade or so, and what we don't want is the federal government to launch another review. There's been enough reviews. The federal government and Canada Post knows what action they need to take to turn the postal service around. There's been a lot of recommendations from a lot of different reports, and CFIB is recommending that they follow those recommendations so they can provide a more certain service to customers, including small businesses.
Canada Post and the CUPW have been engaged in a more than 18-month-long period of negotiations and subsequent strike activity, which the Crown Corporation says increased the company's financial losses at a rate of $10 million per day in June. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up close to 52 points on the day to finish at 27,416. The Dow was up 507 points to 45,010. The S&P 500 was up 49 to 6358, and the Nasdaq was up 127 points to finish at 21,020. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 11 cents to 65.42 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 18 cents to 307 US. Gold was down 44.46 to 33.8686 US an ounce, and silver was down 4 cents to 39.26 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.78 per bushel. Barley is at $6.31. Canola is at $15.67, and corn is at $7.31 per bushel. Live cattle were up 205 to 227.02. Feeder cattle were up 325 to 331.52. Lean hogs were up 72 cents to 108.07. All of those were August contracts. And the Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 73.60 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, a 2-day sentencing hearing began today in an Ottawa courtroom for Freedom Convoy organizers Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. Back in April, the two were found guilty of mischief for their role in the 2022 trucker protest against COVID-19 public health measures that saw the downtown core of the nation's capital paralyzed for 3 weeks. The Crown is seeking a 7-year prison sentence for Lich and 8 years for Barber. Well, each year, thousands of senior citizens are abused, neglected, or financially exploited. This mistreatment is called elder abuse. And today, Marissa Hardy with Lethbridge Elder Abuse Response Network will share about this important issue and how we can recognize signs of elder abuse. Stay with us to learn more. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website anytime or our YouTube channel to see more of our stories and interviews.
Canada's population continues to age, and we are seeing an increase in the number of seniors across our country. They bring a wealth of wisdom and experience that we can benefit from, but seniors can also be vulnerable to abuse. What is elder abuse? How often does it happen? And what can be done to prevent it? Joining me to discuss this is Melissa Hardy. She is the Learn Case Manager with the Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization. Marissa, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. I was just saying how it's cool to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you here. So LEARN is actually an acronym for Lethbridge Elder Abuse Response Network. Can you just give us a brief overview of what your organization is all about?
Yes. So on the ground, there's 2 of us as case managers who oversee the program. However, at a grander scheme, we're connected to what's called a coordinated community response. So what we have is a team of senior serving agencies who are involved in the senior demographic here in Lethbridge and rural. We actually cover quite a bit.
Oh, wow.
Now. The Lethbridge part is a little misleading, but we cover MD of Taber, County of Cardston, we cover County of Warner and County of Lethbridge.
Wow.
Yeah. So at a grand, we can't do what we do without the support of community providers, whether that's the local police service, whether that's RCMP,
right,
whether that is on the grounds with financial support and needing connection to social resources. So our role as social workers and case managers is to help coordinate and connect those older adults experiencing violence or harm to resources to hopefully help to mitigate if we cannot fully intervene.
So how often is elder abuse, or how common is elder abuse in Canada? I would like to think that it doesn't happen that often, but you would probably have more stats to share with me.
It seems that more frequently than ever, especially with the affordability crisis and with housing, it can be really difficult for people to navigate, and oftentimes that ends up leaning a little too heavily onto others, and oftentimes that ends up being the grandparents or the parents, the aging parents of folks who don't have necessarily as much connection to resources, or who might just be part of the experiencing difficulty with that, right? So that has actually increased quite a bit over the last few years in terms of who we've seen on our caseload and how it's shown up. So unfortunately, it is quite rampant, and it is quite common.
And I've been told that the most common forms of elder abuse are financial and emotional, and these often involve family members. What are some ways that a relative might try to steal or manipulate money, control, or property away from seniors?
Sometimes that looks ultimately with the relationship that is had between that older adult and the person causing harm. It might look like emotional manipulation to getting their bank card, to getting them to take out money for them. Or maybe it's ease of access. Perhaps they saw their checkbook lying around and knew that they were able to sign a signature. Or perhaps it's maybe more extreme as having them sign their home over to them. To the person causing harm. So oftentimes it may also just be outright theft, but one of the common ones is taking their bank account or accessing their bank account without their consent, despite them having given consent previously, for example.
Wow. And so when it comes to taking control, how common is it for a family member who has been granted power of attorney by an elderly family member only to have that power abused?
That is something that, when looking at that financial abuse and how prevalent it is amongst our caseload, as it is one of the most common, that is one of the ones that happens quite a bit. Or what will happen in lieu of being a power of attorney is that older adult might have their adult child sign on to be joint on their bank account. So that then makes them entitled to that account as well in terms of account ownership. So regardless of the older adult being the one to deposit and have their money in there, if they do not have that child noted as their power of attorney, but instead add them joint on the bank account, that makes it more difficult if they do steal, because there's no legal recourse there when it comes to unauthorized access, because they own the account as well. So if it's not a power of attorney misuse where they're named on that account as a power of attorney and have access that way, it might look like a joint account too.
Wow. And with finances, it can often be a stranger targeting seniors with various scams, and I've heard of a few of them that are going around targeting seniors. Any advice to seniors on what to be on the lookout for?
Have people you can rely on to feed some information and to run information by them, to say, hey, this person showed up today and they offered me lawn services for this amount of money a month. Is that feasible? Is that something that is a more typical cost, for example? Because that's one where folks might show up in person to offer services, in person to note and to provide and say, hey, I can do lawn care for you for this amount a month. And so having someone you can trust to ask those questions without feeling judgment or feeling shame or feeling embarrassment, that way you can make a more informed decision, is a very good, strong way for prevention. Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty big one, is having a community to support you so that you can feel that security as well as to be able to look out for it. Now, if it comes to anything that in financial scams where it might be showing up on, you might be getting a phone call, you might be getting anything like that, calling the Canada Anti-Fraud Centre can help to immediately clarify whether or not that's a viable resource. And then it's that neutral third party, because one of the things that scammers or fraudsters might do is lean on that emotional manipulation to say, we can't tell anybody, this is private, or you don't know who you can trust. And so then breaking those ties earlier by having that support network and having that community around you really do help that intervention.
Right, and I had said earlier in our interview that I hope that elder abuse doesn't happen too often. I have some personal experience with elder abuse where a sibling and I had actually witnessed on several occasions my mother being subjected to elder abuse by another family member, and then later on my mother had candidly disclosed to me that it was to the point where she was being driven towards suicide ideation. So I wanted to talk about emotional abuse for a moment here. How would you define emotional abuse, and what does that look like?
Okay, let me do my best here. So emotional abuse, and how I would define it and how we often see it within our program, is the use of language, behavior, and tone in order to inflict or elicit a certain emotion out of an older adult. And this might show up as making them feel guilty or embarrassed or ashamed, and making them then feel responsible to abide by what you might be asking in tandem with that. For example, you might say, You might make someone feel poor about themselves while you're trying to ask them for money. And you might say, hey, come on, you know how much I've done for you over this time. You know how much I've given for you. I've sacrificed so much for you. You owe me, you owe me. That's gonna make someone feel more obligated in the moment to take that involvement and to give in and to become a victim of it, right? Because it's that trusting relationship that exists between that older adult and the person causing harm that makes it so difficult to navigate, right? And so when it comes to emotional abuse, it can be really hard for that older adult to view it as emotional abuse until they're a few degrees separated from it.
How common is it for adult children to threaten to isolate their parents, to keep children, grandchildren, or siblings away, for example, perhaps not realizing that this manipulation is actually a form of elder abuse?
I definitely come across this one quite a bit, and it's one where the older adult or the child doesn't recognize it as abusive or unhealthy behavior. Instead, they're simply responding to a behavior they perceive from the older adult, or however they're choosing to create that power imbalance so that that older adult feels responsible and obligated to abide by them in order to have access to their grandchildren. That's something that we've worked with older adults before on, and having them connected so that they have that resource and support to get visitation to see their grandchildren if it's on the more extreme end of it. Other times it might be about building that healthy relationship back up so that there are boundaries in place, so that there are the ability to cope and process and understand too that sometimes our relationships don't look like what we want them to, and that unless both parties are willing to change, it can often result in that unhealthy back and forth for that relationship dynamic.
And some seniors that are experiencing neglect, they may see that as a form of punishment too, if they are if they're being threatened to be kind of like cut off from the rest of your family, or not see your grandchildren or children or even your siblings.
Absolutely, it increases the vulnerabilities, right? It makes them so much more susceptible when they're unable to leave the home on their own, or they need that companion support or that in-home care. And if maybe someone has taken on that role as a caregiver, originally intending for it to be a healthy one, but instead sliding to caregiver burnout, for example, then we might see some of those habits and behaviors, and then that older adult is in a situation where they're not seeing family or friends intentionally from that caregiver.
So we've talked a lot about mental and emotional abuse. Let's go more into the physical abuse. What are the signs of physical abuse and sexual abuse, and what should caregivers be on the lookout for, and what are some of the signs?
I would say significant behavior changes is a big one if they're contracting any sort of infection that may be sexually transmitted. Bruising as well, or reserved behavior, or resistance and apprehension to maybe either a certain individual or a topic in general, that avoidance, and or perhaps there's more physical behaviors, there's illness, or there's different anger outbursts, things like that might not be explained or typical for that older adult.
And can you touch on medical abuse? Like, can you explain how abuse can even take place with medications?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes when older adults rely on their caregiver or their support to be able to give them the right dosage at the right time, or whether it's them not getting the dosage at all, or it's them taking that medication for themselves to use recreationally. So those ones are quite frequent in occurrence when it comes to that medication.
You're talking about like over medication or under medication, or medication that they did not necessarily consent to?
Yes. So if they're in the role of caregiver and that older adult is declining to take their medication and they're forcing it, forceful medicating, or they're over medicating for the purpose of sedating the older adult, or skipping doses, missing doses, or adjusting based on their own preference or belief despite their agencies and directives indicating otherwise, or healthcare instruction.
Now, seniors at times may be hesitant to tell others about abusive issues. If someone notices or suspects abuse, how should they respond?
There are a few avenues, and it comes down to what role that person that is noticing these behaviors and changes plays in that older adult's life. If they're a community member or they're a care provider and they don't have that personal relationship where they feel comfortable addressing it with the older adult, then that's where I would most certainly recommend reaching out to us to offer that support to the older adult and make that connection. Or whether it looks like that person noticing it and checking in on it, right? One of the biggest things that can happen when trying to be supportive is we might push assert our belief and concern in a way that might not be received well from the older adult. So providing that conversation with a lot of empathy and understanding that they might not view it in the same light, but knowing that you're there to identify the difficulties that have come from that behavior, unhealthy relationship, that is the most receptive way older adults might be willing to talk about it. And then perhaps at that point, they're more willing to talk about what resources and supports they may be willing to connect to.
Marissa Hardy is the Learn Case Manager with the Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization. Marissa, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Canada's airline industry is facing some challenges with a potential shortfall of 6,000 pilots over the next decade. But one Alberta flight school is hoping to do its part to get more pilots in the air. We are joined by Dallas Dirksen. He is the director of Prairie Aviation Training Centre in Three Hills, Alberta, which is part of Mission Aviation Fellowship. Dallas, great to have you with us today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk with you today.
Oh, I would love to hear more about this. So Dallas, first off, let's get to the nitty gritty. Why is Canada falling behind in the number of pilots needed? What is driving that?
Well, I would say it's not only Canada falling behind, it's a global pilot shortage. My best guess is that it's just simply that travel is happening more than it ever has in the history of the world. Global travel is just a daily thing, and it's growing and growing and growing. And the growth and need for travel is just simply exceeding the ability of flight schools to provide pilots in a timely enough manner to keep up with that demand.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like such an exciting career, and generally you think of pilots as making good money. You've got the lifetime benefits if you get on with a big, commercial carrier or whatnot. Seems like it should be attractive, but yeah, we are hearing these issues, and of course strikes with, we've heard a lot about WestJet striking in the past. But besides all of that, Dallas, tell us a bit about Prairie Aviation Training Center, or PATC, I guess, as you call it, and also Mission Aviation Fellowship. What's that all about?
All right, so Mission Aviation Fellowship is a Christian mission and humanitarian organization that flies in developing nations all around the world. And we use small bush aircraft to do that. And so the skill set of an MAF pilot, although very similar, is very different than the skill set of an airline pilot. It does complement each other, but there's some pretty specific things to the flying that MAF does. The vision of MAF is to provide help, hope, and healing for isolated people around the world, and to bring them the love of God using aviation.
Okay, so with that said, tell us about Prairie Aviation Training Center, where you are now.
Sure. PATC is located in Three Hills, just northeast of Calgary. It was started in 1992 by a group of people who really saw the need for mission aviation focused training for pilots who are planning to go into mission aviation. And so they connected with Prairie College, and the Associate of Arts in Mission Aviation was born at that time. That's more than 30 years we've been doing that now.
That's incredible. So is it basically just basic pilot training, or is it a special kind of skills required?
Pilot training is similar throughout Canada. We're legislated by Transport Canada, and we have to provide our training in accordance with what the regulations are. However, there is some flexibility in there for flight schools to do training with their own flavor. And so the flavor that we have is mission aviation. And so we really emphasize skills like short field landing, soft field landing, kind of a different kind of pilot decision making than you might find for an airline pilot. And like I said, the two complement each other really well. But when we're looking at our students potentially going off with MAF to fly in Papua New Guinea on an airstrip that's 1,200 feet long and a 10% slope, that's a very unique skill set.
Oh, it sure is. It sure is. And Dallas, I understand that you guys recently received a delivery of cutting-edge Canadian-made virtual reality flight simulators. And apparently Mission Aviation Fellowship is one of the first organizations in the country to use these. So what are the benefits of these flight simulators?
That's right. So about a year and a half, we started looking for a new technology or another flight simulator that might help us to provide better, more effective training. And we kind of stumbled onto this small company in Ontario who is developing these new flight simulators. They call them a mixed reality flight simulator. And I guess one of the challenges for smaller flight schools and most flight schools around the nation is that a really, really high level accurate flight simulator costs millions of dollars, which puts it out of reach for basic flight training. And so with the advent of virtual reality, and now with the ability to merge what's really real in front of you with virtual reality, these flight simulators are capable of doing so much more than they have in the past. So these simulators that we're getting, it replicates a 172 cockpit, a Cessna 172, which is a very common training aircraft. And everything on it is exactly in line with what the real airplane is. So the yoke, the throttle position, everything is there. So the muscle memory that students build translates directly into the airplane. Now, when they have the goggles on and they look down and see inside the flight deck, they see what's actually there. So they see their own hands. It's not a digital representation of their hands. It's their own hands, the actual instruments and the actual flight deck of the simulator. But when they look up and look outside, they see the virtual environment. And so it's really, like you said, cutting edge and unique. And the flight model is very, very realistic. And so we see so much potential in this to be able to just be more efficient and effective in how we provide flight training.
Yeah, and I would imagine so specific, like what you were saying before with these shorter fields, and I would imagine you're just flying into all these different countries where people wouldn't ever even imagine.
Yeah, in the partnership with MAF, so I guess to back up slightly, in 2017, MAF partnered with Prairie College and is involved now in running the flight school. And so the training that we're providing is, like I said, very intentionally mission aviation focused. And so the idea being, because the pilot shortage is not only airlines, but it's also felt within mission aviation. And so the faster that we can produce these highly qualified, highly skilled pilots to go with mission aviation agencies, hopefully the faster that gap can be filled. So with this new technology, one of the cool things about it is we can send up drones in Papua New Guinea that can do a very high resolution scan of these remote airstrips that can then be sent back, and that can be added into our virtual environment. So theoretically, in the future, what we're really hoping to be able to do is actually for our graduates who are heading, again, say to Papua New Guinea, we can then put them in the simulator and we can actually provide them airstrip-specific training for these airstrips that they're going to be flying in and out of in Papua New Guinea. So the first time they get there in real life flying their airplane, they can look down on that tiny little postage stamp airstrip and they can be like, hey, I remember this, I've seen this before. And so, the quality of training is increased, the safety, of course, hugely increased. If you crash in a simulator, you hit the reset button. It's wildly different if that happens in real life, as we all know. And then as well, just the ability of the programs overseas to take our graduates and more quickly streamline them and get them online and flying operationally there.
Yeah.
So it's a really exciting development.
It is. I'm just curious, what's involved in these flight missions? Are you dropping off things like food and medicine? Are you bringing missionaries to remote areas? What are you doing exactly?
Yes, all of the above.
Okay.
So I spent 4 years flying in Uganda with MAF, and then an additional 4 years flying in Mongolia. And for a lot of the flying that I did there, most of it was people flying. And so, like you've said, a lot of missionaries who, a 20-minute flight in an airplane can be, it can make the difference between, you know, hours of travel on the road, or in some places even days of travel on the road. So we moved a lot of people to and from remote locations where they were stationed. From Uganda, we flew people up into South Sudan, we flew people west into the Congo, and many other countries around the world where other pilots are flying as well. So there was that. There's a lot of medical flying that happens in these remote places where either the missionaries, the church workers, or the locals have a medical emergency and there's just no medical assistance there.
Yeah.
And so being able to take that call, go there in a matter of minutes or hours, and then transport them to typically the capital city where there's actually more advanced medical care available. You know, there's life-saving flights every day through MAF in addition to the mission and other aspects of the flying that we do.
This must have such an impact on people living in these hard-to-reach areas.
Absolutely. You know, I mentioned the medical flying, so there's that aspect to it. And then spiritually as well, the ability for these missionaries to fly with us, it just enhances the ministry that they're able to do. So they're able to be more effective in what they're doing. Instead of showing up tired and needing a week to recover from the travel, they're able to get right into it. We can provide them with supplies and support that hopefully will allow them to live there and to exist there, to minister there for a much longer time period than maybe would otherwise be possible. And, you know, we trust that through their work as well, the gospel is spread to the people who live there, and then that effect just can go out from those villages into neighboring villages, and we can see the spread of the gospel throughout the world that way.
Yeah, that is wild work that you do. I hear, Dallas, that Prairie Aviation is expanding in size to meet growing demand, and construction is already underway to double your school's capacity. So if we have viewers interested in becoming pilots, how do they go about applying to find a spot in the flight center?
All right, so for our school, as I said, we're a part of Prairie College. So if you go to Prairie's website at prairie.edu, and you can connect with the admissions department there, and that's where all of our applicants go through, and they'll guide you through that application process. You can see more information about PATC there. Alternatively, you can go to maf.ca and look at the MAF website there, and they'll be able to provide you with a lot more information about mission aviation and mission flying if you think that maybe that might be something you want to be involved in.
Right. Do you have any advice for anyone considering a career as a missionary pilot?
Well, first I would say if you're interested, go to your local flight school and do an intro flight. Most flight schools have the ability to do that, and you can find out if you actually enjoy flying. Usually for people who are interested in it, that's not an issue. But that's a great way to do it. And then, like I said, reach out to MAF through the website or call their office. And they'll be able to tell you so much about mission flying, what we do, and of course the connection to us here at PATC and get that process started.
Yeah, and I understand that MAF, or Mission Aviation Fellowship, is collaborating with the national government in Angola to establish a local flight school there. And there are also other global partnerships in development as well?
Sure. MAF flies in over 35 countries, developing nations around the world. And we're constantly on the lookout for partnerships there. There's been flight schools that have been established in other nations as well. For us at PATC, one of the kind of cool partnerships that's happened in the last year is we've partnered with two other similar flight schools, one in the Netherlands and one in Northern Australia, who also provide mission aviation specific training. And through that collaboration with each other, we're all seeing the quality of the training that we're providing is just reaching a higher level than we've done in the past, and a safer level as well, and we're really excited about that.
That's amazing. We are out of time here, but thanks so much for being with us today, Dallas. Appreciate having you on so that you can enlighten us all that there are flight schools out there specifically mission focused. I had no idea.
Yeah, thank you for having me today. I appreciate the chance to share with you.
Of course. Dallas Dirksen is the director of Prairie Aviation Training Center, which is part of Mission Aviation Fellowship. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.